So, many of the times when you hear TED Talks, you hear people talking about a passion that they've discovered in life, and they want to share that with you. So I'm going to share with you my passion. When I was an undergraduate, I was a math major, and I discovered calculus was not my passion. That may come as a surprise to many of you, but I discovered music was a passion for me. And music is a passion which has been infinitely thrilling and kind of curious throughout my life. What is this thing we call music? Why does it create such powerful sensations in it? Why does it bring us together in communities? Why is every culture that we've ever looked at historically had something that functions like music? These are questions that I'm not necessarily going to answer for you today, but I want to throw out some ideas about it. When you think about what music is, we tend to think of something in the auditory framework. Psychologically, you could talk about different kinds of thinking that happens in the brain. We can have auditory thinking, which is somewhat processing sound information coming in linearly, like language. We're speaking to each other, you're listening to my sounds, you're making sense of that. That's kind of an auditory processing that's going on. There's another kind of processing which has to do with visual. So when you're looking at a painting, you're looking at something, there's a kind of visual information which is not coming in linear. We tend to think of music as being more auditory, but as you can see, music is actually visual too. And it started to make me think that when I'm reading a score, I'm actually reading a visual map. But what is that map referring to? The traditional music score in the West is actually directions, not for music, but it's directions for the body. This is a piece for flute of mine on the back, and then this is the computer program that runs with it. But what the flutist is doing, those directions are telling the flutist muscle control, breath control, fingers. It's all about the body movement, which really made me think then that music is more than just visual and auditory, it's actually kinesthetic as well. So this thing that we call music is so much more perhaps than we sort of realize that's going on. When you are physically involved in the motion of the body, we tend to experience auditory experiences. So much of what people compose, and myself as well, we're trying to create patterns that actually make us feel movement. Have you ever been listening to some music and started tapping your foot? Why is that? Why does the body start to respond to certain patterns of music? Why is it that sound is not just in the brain, but it's in the entire part of the body? So this complexity of music being something social, being something that's happening cognitively, but also physically, was the sort of the mystery that I've been sort of exploring the last number of years. When you start to understand how far back does this go, does music carry some important evolutionary benefit for us if it is so pervasive? And these are questions that I don't think there's any clear answer as to what they are. These are some theories. These are very common theories when people talk about music and evolution. One would be that it creates a bond between a mother and an infant. This is not only true in Homo sapiens, but in other species as well. There's a real important bonding that happens between a mother and a child. And you can imagine there's probably some evolutionary benefit for that reason, to be able to find food, protection, all sorts of things are behind that. Another one is you can transmit a lot of emotional information to a lot of individuals at once with music. We are listening to music unconsciously trying to decipher the meaning of what's in those sounds. Just as you're listening to my voice, you're unconsciously making meaning out of the sounds that I'm giving you. Music is doing the same thing. That's why there's some overlap between music and language. We can also look at, besides speech, which we're doing here, there's commonalities there, music and the body, here again, once again. Music and dance are often thought of as part of the same ways of bonding people together. When you look at communities around the world historically, even in certain West African countries, there are definitions of what is called music and dance. There's only one term in the language in certain Ghanaian traditions for that. They don't even have a separate word for dance and music like we do, because it's understood that when there is sound being processed, music, the body is in motion, so that there's only a singularity of that. There's something very much more powerful about in the body that we see in a lot of traditions. Another common idea started back in Darwin. In both his Origin of Species and also in his later book, he talked really about this idea of music is an important part of sexual selection. When you see certain species where there is sound being made, that often is telling somebody that this is my domain, they're marking their territory, here I am, I'm ready to mate, all sorts of things are going on, or it's telling you, my song is so good that I've got the best gene pool here in this competitive thing, and I'm going to get the best female because of that. I've often wondered whether that plays out in music majors in college too. I'm not real sure. when we start to understand what is happening when we're trying to dissect the emotions going on in music, this is a sort of a common chart that you'll see where we divide emotions between sort of a positive and negative valence, and then sort of we can also talk about low and high activity. A lot of people say music is a universal language. I'm not exactly sure that's true. Music is processed universally, but it's done in different ways. If there is a universal, it's sort of in this slide. When you look around the various cultures in the world, you'll see that lots of cultures, when they create music which has sadness, they will use similar qualities. The scales are different, the tunings are different, the chords are different, everything's different except the general qualities. And we will see that this is sort of a universal throughout every culture, has some kind of qualities of these four quadrants. So if you look at what is the difference between something that's happy and something that's angry, very different valence there, but there are a lot of the same qualities of musical parameters there. The biggest difference has to do with timbre, the amount of noise or the amount of roughness in the sound. And that's something I want to focus on, is sort of how are we responding to individual qualities of sound when we are liking something or not liking something. When you go back and look at the evolution of music, we can trace back sort of, from a very young age, you see that 2-month-old can actually respond differently to consonance and dissonance. This is not so true in other species. Monkeys don't seem to have a preference for consonance over dissonance, but humans do. As we go through 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, we start to dissect those quadrants that I was showing you earlier. We can detect when something is happy and sad by the time we're 5 years old. Most of the development musically is done by the age of 7. So there's a cognitive system that's in place in humans by the age of 7. Most of these things are fully developed at that time. We also start to see the more formal training you have in music, then you actually have other kinds of non-musical benefits. You have increases in spatial and quantitative reasoning. There was one study done that I heard in Japan where just in normal processing, people who have been trained in music, their brain works at about 80% of the work that it takes a non-musician to process a problem. There's an efficiency that comes with some kind of domains that get built into the music training. When we talk about children, there's studies, and this is one study that's showing that infants will pay much more attention to a mother singing rather than to a mother speaking. And this is called motherese. It's a sort of a name for that. We've all heard motherese. It's the type of attunement where we're actually, the mother and the child are actually having some kind of bonding. So when we listen to this child for a second.
Hi, Archer. Hi, can you smile? Oh, look, you're so cute. Yeah? You took a nap, huh? Was it a good nap? Huh? Yeah. That's a good boy.
So you can hear the tone of the mother's voice, the inflections, this motherese. Motherese has been studied in every culture, and interesting enough, it's not about the language, because the way mothers do motherese in China or in Africa or here is all the same. There's kind of innate sense that we talk to children in this motherese style of a highly inflected voice, and somehow you can see the child responding to that. It's not the meaning of the words, it's the sound. And this is the first aesthetic experience, in my mind, of music, where we actually are responding pleasurably to a sound in the world. And I think when we're listening to music, we're doing the same thing. We're actually coming back and having that response. Here's another response. So you find this phenomenon with hair dryers, with vacuum cleaners, anything that has white noise quality to it. Young infants like this will respond the same way. So what is it that's going on? Why is sound so settling, that kind of sound? And the people that have understood about this is very close to the sound a child is hearing in the womb. When you're in the womb, you're hearing blood rushing, you're hearing breath, you're hearing white noise for the most part. You don't hear any of the clarity that you get when you're outside. So what the hairdryer in this case, or a vacuum cleaner represents, is the sound of security, of, oh, that's so pleasant, I'm in the womb again, because I'm hearing that similar sound. So you can hear a response From even before we're born, our main job is processing sound and making meaning of that. So when you look at what's happening inside the brain, it's pretty amazing. Inside each ear, there is this system that is collecting the vibrations coming into it, and we have the cochlea, which is the main organ for dissecting that. If you take the cochlea and unfold it here, you see there is the basilar membrane inside. That's a membrane which is responsive to different ratio frequencies. So the thinner we go up, you actually get to the higher frequency ratios will vibrate that basilar membrane. So when we actually sort of do a visualization of that, you can see where all the overtones that are present in a timbre are activating different parts of the basilar membrane. Each of those is sending information into the auditory nerve. The brain is processing that. So what you have is, as the sound becomes more dissonant, here's your dominant 7th chord. This is the most dissonant. And you can see as that gets built up, the entire brain is activated. It's the most exciting. And then when we resolve to consonants, we go down to lower partials. We get less dissonance in the auditory ring. So you can start to see that the physical mechanism in the brain is set up to understand and really process a lot of timbral information on this. So the brain can really pick these particular 6 attributes: pitch, loudness, timbre, duration, spatial location, reverberant environment. All of those are important information for survival, so they have evolutionary benefits. The one I want to focus on is more on timbre. Timbre is sort of the one that doesn't get a lot of attention. There's a term about how much roughness is in sound. As I started thinking about the amount of music that I listen to and whether sounds are pure and have low ratio partials or whether they have a lot of upper partial content, it's defined by a term of auditory roughness, and you can sort of see some of the definitions of that. Instability. Some cultures have a lot more roughness than others. This has been studied since the 19th century, this idea of trying to understand what is it about sound that has roughness and how do we respond to that sound. We all probably recognize this. This is I'm playing a recording of Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix is a certain culture of people. I grew up liking Jimi Hendrix, being a rock and roll guitarist in my early days. And when you listen to this little excerpt, listen to the quality of roughness in the sound of his instrument. So in Jimi Hendrix, the rougher the better. If you can get more distortion out of your guitar, you're actually increasing whatever emotional information is in that stronger. So if you put it onto our quadrant again, which quadrant would that be in? It probably is closer down to the angry feeling. Because a lot of people who resonate with that timbre are angry young males. So then it occurred to me, this is the Chrono String Quartet, and listen to this. It sort of has a happy feel. You know, it's lost all the energy of that other. And it's the same music, it's the same pitches, same chords, same rhythms, everything on one level is the same. But what is entirely different about it is the emotional content has been changed because the timbre is different. A Stradivarius violin is designed on a different aesthetic of timbre than a distortion-related guitar. So it's all about timbre is what is the main thing we're relating to in much of sound. This made me also think between these two different cultures, the culture of classical music, the culture of rock and roll. Let me go look around other cultures to see if I can see the same thing. This is a picture of a famous 15th century Japanese art form called No. And No was built with this very interesting combination of elements. You have an actor, a masked actor, the shite, and he really sort of chants on a couple of pitches. And then behind him is an orchestra, the Hayashi. There are 4 musicians, 3 drummers, and a flute player. You have a male chorus on the side, the jutai. But when you listen to this little excerpt, listen to whether there's stable pitch, to whether there's pure sound in the voice, and tell me how much roughness you hear. So from a Western standpoint, when I listened to that, I thought, how can I analyze that? You know, is it a major scale or a minor scale? Well, you can't even, you know. There was no way from our standard of listening to that to understand, because there's constant auditory roughness. The pitch is constantly in motion. There's the quality of kind of a, you know, my opera singer friends just cringe when they hear this kind of quality of voice, because it sounds like you're just damaging the voice, which is actually true. So, which maybe then try to do an analysis of this. When you look at a spectrum analysis of this, you start to see here this heavy amount of auditory roughness in the voice, these higher partials. There's so much upper information that's going on. This is preferable in this art form. Then I went to another art form. I found this one, which is pansori out of Korea. Pansori is a narrative form where this one singer will tell this story for 5 hours. And the training for this voice is interesting. Used to, they don't do this as much anymore. The training of pansori singers, you would take children and have them gargle water for several hours a day. And what will happen is eventually you get blood coming up, which is a good thing, because you're getting scar tissue on the voice. And that scar tissue kind of gives you the Janis Joplin kind of quality of voice. So listen to this quick excerpt. So you can hear the kind of roughness that's going on that as well. A lot of upper level partial information. Now listen to a very different kind of piece. Francois Cooper, a Baroque French composer. This is a piece written for Holy Week, actually. It's written for some nuns to be singing in a monastery outside of Paris. And listen to the quality of the voice. And when we do an analysis of that, we start to see a very different content. Low partials, almost no roughness to the sound. It has a kind of a serenity to it that has lost all the power. But we can feel an emotional, without even knowing what culture that it's from, we can tell the emotional difference of that. What I've done with my own compositions is really try to explore, are there things that we can do with technology to really create a kind of a new sense? Listen to this voice processed. You can tell there's a voice there. I'm fragmenting the speech enlivening it into a new kind of sound quality. This is a lot of what people do with technology today. Is the computer is the new instrument of the 20th century. It's the only instrument made in the 20th century, new instrument made. So this is another example where I wrote an opera a couple of years ago based upon the poetry of Natasha Trethewey, who is here at Emory. And this is just a little excerpt where I tried to get into the mind of this singer. This is her imagination that we're trying to do. All of the electronic sounds are coming off her voice, are derived from parameters of her voice. So, another example, I've took the string quartet and put it through processing, trying to turn it into really the most rough quality I can on the violin through processing. So I can turn something into something that sounds like Jimi Hendrix if I want. Many of you may have heard this. When you look at electronic dance music, you start to see each of these categories of dance music is really all about different cultures. There are different groups who love this. It's all about different timbres. That was hardcore trance. Now listen to happy hardcore. An entirely different feeling of this. The people who love happy hardcore can't stand happy trance, and vice versa. There are different cultures going on. So really what's going on is culture is really defining that we listen culturally and we listen aesthetically to timbre is a big factor. Many of you have heard auto-tune being used popular. Auto-tune to me is sort of a modern example of motherese. So if I play some T-Pain, who now has an iPhone app, one of the things, this is really to me the same thing that's going on in motherese. Listen to a good example of T-Pain taking some simple speech and turning it into song, basically.
basically we got 80% agreement.
We got 80% agreement.
The 47 million Americans who don't have any health insurance at
No
all.
health insurance at all.
I'm not the first president to take up this cause, but I am determined to be the last.
Determined to be the last.
Doctors, patients, hospitals, wasting money,
Your money.
healthcare,
Medicare. Medicare.
pharmaceutical industry,
Pharmaceutical.
diabetes,
Diabetes.
foot amputation.
Amputation.
When are we gonna say enough is enough?
When enough is enough is enough.
Thank you. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
So when we're listening to this, what is more fun about listening to speech, but turning it into something which has a kind of a vocal patterns to it, is taking speech, turning into music. We respond to it entirely different. We can embed emotional content that's not in the original speech by turning it into sound. So really that's the point I'm really trying to make here, is that we don't realize when we're listening to music, we're listening to cultures, we're listening to other people's consciousness, and we're also realizing that our whole history, all the way back to our mother, is really informed by what we like and dislike. And also the fact that when we're listening to T-Pain, we're listening to our mother as well. So with that, thank you very much.